Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are putting aside all the flashy headlines. We aren't talking about the latest crypto coin that's supposedly going to the moon.
Right.
And we aren't talking about how to get rich quick by flipping condos in the metaverse or anything like that. We're tackling something that I think feels heavy, maybe even a little intimidating for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure.
But it's the structural engineering of your entire life.
Right.
We are talking about wealth,
Mm-hmm.
but not the glossy magazine, private jet kind of wealth. We're talking about the nuts and bolts, the physics of it.
That's right. We are looking at the blueprint. And honestly, I think it's about time we did. This is the stuff that actually matters.
I want to start by challenging a perception. When you hear the word wealth or even something like financial planning, what pops into your head?
For most people, it's one of two things.
Okay.
It's either picking the right stock, getting in on the next big thing.
Predicting what Apple is going to do next quarter.
Exactly. Or, and this is the bigger one, it's just having a really, really high salary.
Right, the income fallacy.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
People think, if I just made $200,000 a year, I'd be wealthy. But if we look at the source material we have today, which is dense, by the way, and I mean that in the best possible way, we see that's just not true.
It's not the whole picture.
Not even close.
Yeah.
Financial planning isn't about picking stocks. It is, like you said, a structural engineering project. It's about the architecture of your net worth, the physics of your cash flow, and the legal bedrock of things like real estate. I mean, you can make $1 million a year and still be structurally unsound.
A house of cards.
A complete house of cards.
So we are going deep today. We're unpacking the personal financial planning process in Canada, and our guide for this is the rigorous training material from the Canadian Securities Institute, specifically Financial Planning 2, Volume 1.
Well, we should be clear, this isn't a blog post written by some 22-year-old finfluencer on TikTok.
Definitely not.
This is the actual material used to train certified professionals.
So we aren't getting the gloss. We're getting the textbook truth, the stuff that usually gets hidden behind the curtain.
It's comprehensive. I was looking through it, and it covers everything from the ethics of advising to the really gritty details of mortgage law and the mathematics of leasing a car.
It's all in there.
So what is our mission here? Why should you, our listener, who might just be trying to pay off a student loan or, save for a wedding, why should you care about jargon like tenancy in common or a debt-to-asset ratio?
Because the goal is to move you from vague financial anxiety to strategic clarity.
I love that phrase.
We want to decode the jargon so that you understand the mathematical truths behind your decisions. You walk into a car dealership. Should you lease that new car or should you buy it?
Right.
The dealer has a spreadsheet that says leasing is cheaper per month. Are they lying? Or is it just a different kind of math they're using?
It's always a different kind of math. It's always a different kind of math. Or, took borrowing to invest. Is that a genius move to fast-track retirement? Or is it a complete disaster waiting to happen? We're going to look at the mechanics of it all so you aren't just trusting someone else's word for it.
I love that. Moving from anxiety to clarity. Because anxiety, it usually comes from the unknown, right? The monster under the bed is scary until you turn the lights on. Today, we turn on the lights. Let's start with the absolute foundation. Section 1 of our sources talks about the human element. It describes the financial planning process itself. But before we get to the steps, I have to ask, why do we even need a formal process? I mean, people managed money for centuries without certified planners. My grandfather didn't have a wealth manager. He had a coffee tin in the cupboard.
He did, but just think about the world your grandfather lived in for a second. If you go back to, say, the 1960s, financial life was relatively simple. It just was.
How so?
Well, you had a job, likely with one company for 30, maybe 40 years. You probably had a defined benefit pension, which is, it's a unicorn these days.
Completely.
You had a bank account and a mortgage. And the professionals stayed in their lanes. You went to your banker for a loan, your accountant for taxes, and your lawyer for a will. The banker didn't try to sell you insurance, and the lawyer didn't try to sell you stocks.
Simpler times. You knew who to talk to about what.
Much simpler. But then the 1970s hit. And this is really where the modern financial industry was born out of a crisis.
What happened?
You had the oil embargo, you had a massive recession, and most importantly, you had inflation just soaring into the double digits. I'm talking 10, 12, even 14% a year.
Wow. Which just completely destroys the coffee tin strategy. If inflation is 12%, your cash is literally burning up.
It's melting, exactly. Suddenly, the old playbook just didn't work. Keeping money in the bank meant you were actively losing purchasing power. Unemployment was high. Taxes were rising to try and combat the inflation, and financial products started getting way more complicated to try and hedge against all this mess.
So people were lost.
They were completely lost. They needed someone who could look at the whole picture, not just one little slice of the pie. They needed someone to integrate the tax strategy with the investment strategy with the estate plan. That's really when the modern financial advisory profession was born.
So it was born out of chaos. It's not just a service industry, it's a damage control industry.
Precisely. And because it deals with people's livelihoods, their ability to eat when they're 80, it had to become standardized. You can't just wing it. So the source material, it outlines a very specific 6-step framework for financial planning.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating here is the emphasis that planning isn't a one-time event. You don't just make a plan, print it out, bind it in leather, and stick it on a shelf.
Right, it's not a trophy.
No, it's a loop. It's a living thing.
Okay, let's unpack these steps. Step 1 is engagement.
Yeah.
Which sounds like we're getting married.
In a way, you are. This is all about establishing the relationship. It sounds really formal, but it's so critical. It usually involves something called a letter of engagement.
So a contract.
Basically, yeah. It sets the ground rules. How is the advisor paid? Is it a fee? Is it commission? What services are they actually providing? Are they just doing your investment management, or are they doing tax planning and insurance reviews too? It just prevents mismatched expectations later on.
Because the last thing you want is to think you're getting this comprehensive, holistic plan, and the advisor thinks they're just selling you a single mutual fund.
That's the nightmare.
Yeah.
Clarity is kindness. That's what this step is about.
Okay, so that's step 1. Then we move to step 2, data collection. This seems straightforward enough. You know, bring me your bank statements, bring me your tax returns, put the papers on the desk.
It is, but the text makes a massive distinction here that we really need to spend some time on. It distinguishes between quantitative and qualitative data.
Okay.
Quantitative is the easy part. That's the numbers. Your income, your assets, your liabilities.
Yeah.
The math is the math.
But the qualitative, that's the feelings, the soft stuff.
That's the psychology. And this is where most financial plans fail. Qualitative data is, what is your actual risk tolerance? Not what you think it is on a good day, but what it actually is when the market is crashing.
What keeps you up at night?
Exactly. What keeps you up at night? Do you want to leave a huge inheritance to your kids, or do you want to bounce the last check to the undertaker? If an advisor doesn't dig into the qualitative stuff, they can't build a plan that you will actually stick to.
I can imagine that's a hard conversation for some people. Hi, I know we just met, but tell me your deepest fears about poverty and death.
It is awkward. It really is. But it's so necessary. We'll see exactly why in a minute with a case study from the book. But let's just finish the steps first.
Okay.
Step 3 is analysis. This is where the advisor plays detective. They take all the data, both the numbers and the feelings, and they identify the gaps.
So you say you want to retire at 55.
With $5,000 a month in income, but your current savings rate says you'll be working until you're 75. That's the gap.
Ouch. That's the reality check. Okay, step 4 is recommendation.
Right. Strategizing solutions. This is where they tell you how to bridge that gap. Okay, here's what we need to do. Maybe you need to save more. Maybe you need to take on a little more risk in your portfolio. Or maybe we need to lower your retirement expectations. It's the what do we do now phase.
And step 5, implementation.
Taking action. This is buying the insurance, opening the new investment account, signing the updated will. A plan without implementation is just a wish. And frankly, this is where procrastination absolutely kills wealth. People get the plan, they see the work involved, and they freeze.
It's overwhelming.
It can be. A good advisor helps you break it into small, manageable steps.
And finally, step 6, which the text says is the most often missed step, review.
It's so critical. Life changes. You get married, you get divorced, you have triplets, the market crashes, you lose your job, you get a huge promotion. The plan has to adapt. If you skip the review, the plan becomes obsolete really, really quickly.
It's like a prescription for glasses.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It works for your eyes today. In 5 years, if you're still wearing the same prescription, you're probably going to be walking into walls.
I want to circle back to that qualitative data part, the psychology. The source material talks about a life cycle approach. It says we all move through 4 pretty distinct stages. And this isn't just about age, it's about your financial mindset.
This is a great framework for understanding where you are right now. The first stage is accumulation.
Okay.
This is usually your early career.
Yeah.
Assets are low. You might just have a used car and a laptop. Your debt might be really high student loans, maybe a new huge mortgage.
Sounds familiar.
But generally, your risk tolerance is higher because you have a long time horizon. You have what's called human capital. your ability to work for the next 40 years, even if you don't have much financial capital.
Right. So if the market crashes when you're 25, it sucks, but you have 4 decades of wages ahead of you to recover and buy more assets on sale.
Exactly. Then you move into the consolidation phase.
Hmm.
This is usually your peak earning years, maybe your 40s and 50s. The debts are getting paid down. The mortgage is smaller. The kids might be finishing up with university. The focus shifts from just surviving to really optimizing, to tax planning and ramping up savings, because retirement isn't some abstract concept anymore. It's a real date on the calendar. You're trying to hold on to what you've made.
Then, if you've done that right, you get to financial independence.
Retirement, that's the goal. You're no longer working for money. Your money is now working for you. You are living off your assets. And the psychology here shifts dramatically from growth to preservation.
Because you can't afford a big hit.
You just can't. A 40% drop in your portfolio at age 68 is a catastrophe because you don't have the wages coming to replace it.
And then there's a final stage, which not everyone gets to, gifting.
Right. This is estate planning, philanthropy, passing it on. This is for people who have successfully built more than they need for their own independence. It's all about legacy.
To illustrate this, and specifically the conflict between what people say they want and what they really feel, the text gives us this great case study, a guy named Solomon Goldsmith. I want to dig into Solomon's story because I feel like I know this guy.
Solomon is a classic case. He's 59 years old. He's been a salaried auto worker his whole life. Very predictable. He's used to a steady paycheck, a union pension. He's never really invested in the stock market before. And then suddenly he inherits $100,000.
Which for him is a life-changing amount of money.
It's huge. So he goes to a financial planner named Fiona. And here is where that qualitative data gets really messy.
Okay.
Solomon sits down and he tells Fiona, I want to invest this. I want growth. I want to make this money work for me.
Because everyone wants to make money. Who walks into a planner's office and says, hi, I'd like you to please lose my money?
Exactly. But Fiona, being a good planner, she digs deeper. She starts asking about his history, his experience. She realizes he has zero experience with market volatility. So she asks the key question, Solomon, how would you feel if this $100,000 inheritance became $80,000 next month?
And you can just imagine his face.
The text says you could see the color drain from his face. So on the surface, his stated goal is growth. But his actual psychological profile, his risk tolerance, is safety.
Complete capital preservation.
Correct. And this is the Know Your Client or KYC obligation. It's a regulatory requirement. If Fiona had just listened to his words, I want growth, and dumped his inheritance into high-growth tech stocks, she would be failing him.
Because the first time the market dipped 5%, he'd be on the phone panicking.
He'd panic, sell everything at a loss, and probably never trust investing again. He'd buy high and sell low for the rest of his life.
So Fiona's job isn't just to pick the investments. It's to manage Solomon.
Her primary job is to manage Solomon's behavior. She has to explain the trade-off. Solomon, to get the growth you say you want, you have to accept this level of risk. If you can't sleep at night with that risk, we have to lower your expectations for growth. It's about aligning the fantasy with the reality.
That leads us right into the ethics of this whole industry. Because if Fiona was a different kind of advisor, a less scrupulous one, she might just sell him whatever product pays her the highest commission, right?
Absolutely.
The source material is very, very heavy on this client-first rule.
It is the golden rule of the profession. It has to be. The Code of Ethics lists principles like integrity, objectivity, competence, and confidentiality. But the big one, the legally enforceable one, is the duty of care.
What does that mean exactly?
It's a legal obligation to act with reasonable care and skill. You have to act as a prudent professional would in the same situation. You can't be reckless with someone's life savings.
And that's tied into the huge issue of conflict of interest.
Right.
We need to talk about how advisors get paid, because the text breaks this down. Fee only versus commission versus salary. This is something I think 90% of clients are afraid to ask about or don't even know they should ask.
It's the most important question you can ask. It's crucial to understand this. Let's break it down. If an advisor is commission-based, they get paid when they sell you a product. They might get, say, 4% or 5% of the money you invest in a particular mutual fund.
Okay.
That creates an inherent conflict of interest. Are they recommending this mutual fund because it's the absolute best one for your specific needs? or because it happens to pay the highest commission to the advisor.
It's like asking a barber if you need a haircut.
The answer is always yes.
Yeah.
Or asking a car dealer which car on the lot is best, and they just happen to point to the one with the biggest manufacturer's bonus attached that month.
Right.
Now, you contrast that with fee only. This means you pay the advisor directly. It could be an hourly fee, a flat fee for a plan, or a percentage of your total assets, like 1% a year. But it's regardless of what they buy or sell.
So in a fee-only model, if the advisor's best advice is for me to just sit in cash for 6 months, they still get paid. They don't have to sell me a product in order to eat.
Correct. It aligns the incentives so much better. The advisor's success is tied to your portfolio growing, not to how many products they transact.
So is commission always bad?
The source material doesn't say commissions are evil. I mean, sometimes they're the only way smaller investors can get access to professional advice, but it emphasizes transparency. You, as the client, need to know exactly how the person across the table is feeding their family so you can weigh their advice properly.
And if you ask and they get squirmy.
If they get squirmy, you run.
If they get squirmy, run. Good advice for dating and for finance. Okay, let's move from the people to the numbers. Section 2, the financial selfie. We need to define the scorecard. And the text focuses so heavily on net worth.
Net worth is the ultimate scorecard. It's a simple formula. Total assets minus total liabilities. Everything you own minus everything you owe.
Why does this one number matter more than income? We live in a society that is obsessed with income. Oh, she makes 6 figures. You got a big raise. We don't walk around with our net worth printed on our T-shirts.
Because income is just the water flowing through the pipe. Net worth is how much water is actually in the tank. You can have a massive income. Doctors, lawyers, professional athletes are famous for this. But if you spend it all, or if you have massive debts servicing that high-flying lifestyle, your net worth could be zero. Or worse.
It could be negative.
It could be negative. And technically, that can be a state of insolvency. That's defined as when your liabilities exceed your assets and you cannot meet your obligations as they come due.
Yeah.
That is a massive, massive red flag. You can look rich and be completely insolvent.
But just having a positive number isn't enough, is it? You need to diagnose the health of that net worth. The text gives us some really useful ratios, a financial health checkup. Let's run through the big ones, starting with the basic liquidity ratio.
This is your sleep at night number. I love this one. You take your liquid assets, that's cash, savings accounts, money market funds, things you can access today without a penalty.
Right. Easily accessible.
And you divide that number by your total monthly expenses.
Okay, so if I have, say, $15,000 in cash in a savings account, and my life costs $5,000 a month to run.
Your ratio is 3. You have 3 months of runway, 3 months of living expenses saved up.
And what's the target for that?
The standard advice is a minimum of 3 to 6 months. If that number is 0.5, meaning you have 2 weeks of cash, you are living right on the edge. One blown car transmission, one unexpected delay in your paycheck, and you are using credit cards to buy groceries.
But hold on, 6 months of expenses,
Yeah.
just sitting in a savings account, earning what, maybe 1% interest if you're lucky? If inflation is 3% or 4%, aren't I just losing money every single day I hold that cash? Isn't that bad advice?
That is the pushback I always hear. My money is lazy, it's not working for me. But you have to reframe it. You have to view that cash not as an investment, but as insurance.
Okay.
You pay premiums for your car insurance every month, right? That's 100% loss. You don't get that money back. The loss to inflation on your emergency fund cash is the premium you pay for financial stability. It's the price of liquidity. It prevents you from being forced to sell your long-term investments, your stocks, your real estate at a terrible time just to pay a surprise bill. Liquidity buys you time, and time is everything.
Okay, I can accept that. It's an insurance premium. What about the debt-to-asset ratio?
This measures your solvency. You take your total debt and divide it by your total assets. So if you have $500,000 in assets, but $450,000 of that is debt,
Your ratio is 90%.
it's 90%. You are highly, highly leveraged. If the value of your assets drops by just 10%, you are completely wiped out. You have zero equity. Your net worth is zero. You want this number to go down over time consistently.
And finally, there's the investment assets to net worth ratio.
This one is interesting. It answers the question, how much of my wealth is actually working for me? As you get older and move through the life cycle, this number should rise. If your net worth is $1 million, but $900,000 of that is the equity in your primary home and your cottage and your fancy cars, your ratio is really low.
Because those are use assets, not investment assets.
Exactly. You can't eat your house. You can't pay your bills with your car. You want assets that generate income, like dividends from stocks or rent from a property, or that grow in value.
The source material gives us a pretty stark example of this with a couple they call Tim and Ellen Moore. I want to do a bit of a forensic audit on these two because their situation is scary.
Yes, the Moorns. On paper, if you just looked at the top line number, they look okay. They have a net worth of about $107,800. Not rich by any means, but positive.
It's in the black.
It's in the black. But when you look closer, when you apply these ratios, their financial structure is terrifying. Their liquid assets to total assets ratio is 1%.
1%. So for every $100 they own, only $1 is in cash.
That's right. They have a house, they have 2 cars, they have furniture, but they have almost zero liquidity. They are the absolute classic definition of being house poor.
So let's just play this out. Tim gets laid off from his job, or the furnace dies in the middle of February and it costs $5,000 to replace. They don't have $5,000. What happens next?
They immediately spiral. They have to put it on a credit card at 20% interest. Or they try to get a line of credit from the bank. But now that Tim doesn't have a job, the bank says no. They are technically solvent, but they are completely illiquid. And liquidity issues are usually what bankrupt people, not solvency issues.
So how do we fix a situation like the Moornas? This brings us to cash flow management.
Right. We have to distinguish between the stock of money, which is your net worth, and the flow of money, which is your cash flow. If the net worth is the amount of water in the tank, cash flow is the plumbing. To fix the tank, you have to fix the leaky plumbing.
And that starts with understanding your expenses.
It does. You have to be brutally honest about the difference between discretionary and non-discretionary expense.
Needs versus wants. But that line can get really blurry, can't it? I mean, I need my morning coffee to function, therefore, Starbucks is a utility.
Wow, nice try. I've heard that one before. The text is pretty strict here. Mortgage or rent, heat, hydro, basic groceries, insurance premiums, those are non-discretionary. If you don't pay them, very bad things happen legally or physically.
You lose your house or the lights go off.
Exactly. Dining out, premium cable packages, the new iPhone every year, and yes, your $7 latte, those are discretionary. The Moornies need to cut their discretionary spending ruthlessly, even if it's just for 6 months, to build that emergency fund.
The text suggests a strategy for this called Pay Yourself First, which sounds like a bumper sticker slogan. Does it actually work?
It is the single most effective behavioral hack in personal finance. Most people operate like this. Income minus expenses equals savings. In other words, I'll save whatever is left over at the end of the month.
But there's never anything left over.
Nothing is ever left over. It's Parkinson's law. Expenses will always expand to match income.
So Pay Yourself First just flips the equation.
It flips the whole equation. It becomes income minus savings equals expenses. You treat your savings contribution, say $500 a month, as a non-negotiable bill. It's like your mortgage. It comes out of your account automatically on payday. Before you even see it, it goes into a separate savings account. Then you learn to live on what remains. You don't miss what you don't see.
And where should that savings go initially? Into the emergency fund, I assume.
Absolutely. And the text makes a crucial distinction here that trips a lot of people up. The emergency fund must be liquid and stable. Think cashable GICs or high-interest savings accounts. It should not be in your RRSP, your Registered Retirement Savings Plan.
Wait, hang on. Why not? RRSPs save you taxes. You get a nice refund every year. Why wouldn't I put my emergency cash in there and get a tax break on it?
Because the RRSP has a big, expensive fence around it. If you have a true emergency, you need the money now, without penalty. If you pull money out of an RRSP before retirement, 2 very bad things happen. 1, you get hit with an immediate withholding tax. You ask to pull out $5,000. The bank might only give you $4,500 because they have to send the rest directly to the CRA.
And you still have to declare it as income at the end of the year.
You got it. And 2, and this is the killer, you permanently lose that contribution room. You can never put that $5,000 back into your RRSP. It's gone forever.
So you're burning your future retirement shelter just to keep warm today.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
An emergency fund is not for retirement. It's for survival. Keep it accessible and separate.
That is a critical distinction. Okay, let's pivot to the thing that eats up most people's cash flow. Debt. Section 3 calls it the double-edged sword.
And that's the perfect metaphor. Credit isn't inherently evil. It's a tool. It's a powerful tool that redistributes your spending power over time. It allows you to buy a house today and pay for it over 25 years. That's incredibly useful, but it cuts both ways.
The text breaks it down into good debt versus bad debt, which I admit feels a little bit judgmental, but explain the difference.
It's mostly about 2 things: tax deductibility and whether it helps build your net worth. Good debt is usually debt taken on to acquire an asset that will grow in value or produce income. A mortgage is generally considered good debt because it helps you build a valuable asset, even if the interest isn't tax-deductible for a primary residence in Canada.
And borrowing to invest.
Borrowing to invest, if done correctly, can be good debt because the interest might be tax-deductible. Bad debt is non-tax-deductible debt used to buy things that go down in value.
Like credit cards, car loans.
Credit cards, car loans, borrowing for a vacation. This is just money, renting money to buy things that depreciate. It's a constant drain on your net worth.
Okay, let's talk about cars. This is a huge section in the source material. Leasing versus buying. And I feel like everyone has a very strong opinion on this. Always buy used. Leasing is for suckers. No, leasing is smart for your cash flow. But the text actually breaks down the math. I want to get into the weeds here because dealerships use jargon specifically to confuse people.
They absolutely do. Let's decode the dictionary for them. First, you have the net capitalized value, or NCV.
Which is just a fancy, intimidating word for the price of the car.
It's all it is. It is the price. And the text warns you, negotiate this first. Most people walk in and say, I want my payment to be $400 a month. The dealer says, great, we can do that. And then they just adjust the length of the lease or the down payment to hit that number while selling you the car at full sticker price. You have to negotiate the NCV as if you were buying it with cash.
Okay, so settle on the price first. Got it. Then you have the residual value.
That's the dealership's prediction of what the car will be worth at the end of the lease. If the residual value is high, your monthly payments will be lower because you're only paying for the depreciation that happens during your term.
And then the big one, the one that feels like a magic trick, the money factor. I hear this and I just think, what? The money factor is 0.0025.
It's the hidden interest rate. And this is where the math trick happens. The dealer says, oh, the money factor is only 0.00025. That's basically zero.
And if you don't know the math, you just nod your head and say, okay.
You do. But here's the secret formula they don't tell you. To get the equivalent annual percentage rate, the APR, the interest rate we all understand, you have to multiply that money factor by 2,400.
2,400, why?
It's just the way the math works out. Yep. So pull out your phone, 0.00025 times 2,400 equals 6.
6%.
Suddenly, that basically zero rate is actually a 6% interest rate. If the bank across the street is offering a car loan at 4%, the lease is a total ripoff from an interest perspective. But you would never know if you didn't do that conversion.
That is incredibly sneaky. I feel like that should be illegal.
It's just industry standard. They're not required to disclose the APR on a lease.
Wow. Now let's do the showdown. Purely mathematically, which one wins? Leasing or buying?
The text uses an example of a guy named Jacques Tellier to run the numbers. Let's say you're looking at a brand new Honda Civic.
You lease it. The monthly payment is, say, $350.
You buy it with a loan. The monthly payment is $550. The lease looks way cheaper, right? Much better for your monthly cash flow.
It's $200 extra in my pocket every single month.
That's the trap. Because at the end of 4 years, the lease ends. You give the keys back, you have no car, you have to go lease another one, you have car payments forever. With a loan, yes, you paid more per month, but at the end of 4 years, the payments stop, and you own an asset that's still worth maybe $10,000 or $15,000. When you calculate the total cost of ownership over a 10-year period, buying almost always wins, hands down.
Because with leasing, you're always renting.
You are perpetually renting your lifestyle. You are paying for the most expensive years of a car's life, the first 4 years of depreciation, over and over and over again. You never get off the treadmill.
It's the trap of continuous payments. Okay. Now, what if you've already made some of these mistakes? You have the high-interest credit card debt, you have the car loan, and you're drowning. The text talks about consolidation loans.
This is a very common and often very effective strategy. You take all your high-interest debt, the credit cards at 19%, the department store cards at 28%, and you roll them all into one single lower-interest loan, maybe a line of credit at 7% or 8%.
Mathematically, that's a complete no-brainer. You save a fortune in interest charges.
Mathematically, yes.
Yeah.
It is absolutely the correct move. Behaviorally, it is incredibly dangerous. The text warns about the behavioral trap, and here's what usually happens. You get the consolidation loan, you pay off your Visa, the Visa now has a zero balance, you feel this huge sense of relief, you feel rich.
And you go out for a nice dinner to celebrate being debt-free?
Exactly. And you put it on the Visa. You start using the card again. Oh, it's just for gas. It's just for groceries this week. 6 months later, you have the full consolidation loan payment plus a max-out credit card again. You have just doubled your debt. This happens all the time.
It's like you treated the symptom, the high interest rate, without curing the disease, which was the spending habit.
That's it exactly. Consolidation only works if you perform what I call plastic surgery. You cut up the cards. You close the accounts. If you don't change the underlying spending habit, the math will not save you.
Let's move to the other side of debt leverage, or borrowing to invest. This is the good debt we mentioned earlier. The text calls it using other people's money, or OPM.
This is how the rich often get richer, and is how the middle class often go broke. The concept is beautifully simple. I borrow money at, say, 5% interest. I invest it in something that earns 8%. I get to keep the 3% difference, the spread.
It sounds like free money when you put it like that.
It feels like free money until the market turns against you. Leverage is a magnifier. It's an amplifier. It magnifies your gains, yes, but it magnifies your losses just as efficiently.
Can you walk us through an example?
Sure. Let's say you have $10,000 of your own money, and you borrow another $10,000 from your broker. You invest the full $20,000. If the market goes up 10%, your investment is now worth $22,000. You made $2,000. On your original $10,000 of equity, that's a 20% return. Amazing.
It doubles your return.
But if the market drops 10%, your $20,000 portfolio loses $2,000. It's now worth $18,000. You still owe the bank the $10,000 you borrowed. So your personal equity has dropped from $10,000 down to $8,000. You lost 20% of your own money on a 10% market drop.
So it doubles your losses too.
It doubles your losses. And here is the absolute nightmare scenario that comes with leverage: the margin call.
This is the phrase that strikes fear into the heart of every investor.
It should. If you borrow from a broker to invest, they hold your stocks as collateral for the loan. If the stock price drops too much, your collateral is no longer valuable enough to cover the loan. The broker calls you up, or these days, sends you an automated email and says, you need to deposit more cash into your account by 4 p.m. today, or we will start selling your stocks.
And if you don't have the cash just lying around,
They sell your stocks, and remember, they are selling them after they have already dropped significantly. They are forcing you to sell at the bottom. You lose the asset, you lock in the loss, and you still owe any remaining balance on the loan. It is a recipe for complete financial devastation.
so leverage is a tool for the experienced, the brave, and the very, very solvent.
Correct. And there are specific tax rules, too, that you have to know. You can't just borrow money to buy anything and then deduct the interest. The text specifies there must be a reasonable expectation of income, and the CRA defines income for this purpose as interest or dividends,
Not just capital gains.
not just capital gains. So if you borrow money to buy a high-flying tech stock that pays 0 dividends, the CRA might come back and deny your interest deduction. You have to be very careful with the rules.
Speaking of financial devastation, the section on debt ends with what it calls the nuclear option, bankruptcy.
It is the legal process that essentially halts all creditor proceedings. It's a shield, but it comes at an incredibly heavy cost. You surrender almost all your assets to a licensed insolvency trustee. They then sell everything, except for a few legally exempt items like your clothes and some basic furniture, to pay back your creditors a fraction of what they're owed.
But it's not just about losing your stuff, right? The consequences haunt you for years.
They absolutely do. Your credit rating gets an R9 rating, which is the worst possible score for 6 to 7 years after you're discharged from bankruptcy. Try getting all phone plan. Try renting a new apartment. Landlords do credit checks. For years, you are a financial pariah. It could even affect your employment. Some jobs, like in insurance or banking or any role that requires you to be bonded, are off limits.
The text does mention a consumer proposal as a less drastic alternative.
Yes, it's a sort of middle ground. You work with a trustee to make a formal offer to your creditors to pay back a portion of what you owe, say 30 cents on the dollar over a fixed period, usually up to 5 years. If enough creditors agree, it becomes legally binding. You generally get to keep your assets, and the creditors get more than they would in a bankruptcy. It's still a major black mark on your credit report, but it's less severe and you recover faster than from a full bankruptcy.
Okay, let's take a breath. We've covered debt. Now let's talk about the biggest asset and the biggest debt most people will ever have, the roof over your head. Section 4 covers real estate, and this gets legal fast.
It does. And this is where something as simple as ownership structure really, really matters. Most people just think, I bought a house, I own the house.
Yeah.
But how you hold the title to that property can change everything, especially for your family down the road.
Let's break down the two main types, joint tenancy versus tenancy in common. These sound almost the same, but the distinction is life-altering.
It's a huge difference. Joint tenancy is the standard for married couples in most of Canada. It have what's called the right of survivorship. This is the key phrase. If you and your spouse own a home as joint tenants and your spouse passes away, you automatically inherit their 50% share of the house. It doesn't go through their will. It doesn't go through probate, so you avoid those fees. It becomes yours. It is seamless and immediate.
Okay, that sounds simple enough. Now, what about tenancy in common?
This is usually for people who are not married business partners buying a property or two friends buying a cottage together. There is no right of survivorship.
What does that mean in practice?
Let's paint a nightmare scenario.
Eh.
You buy a cottage with your best friend, Bob. You do it as tenants in common because you each put in 50% of the money. A few years later, Bob tragically dies. Does Bob's half of the cottage automatically go to you? No. Bob's share goes to his estate. It's distributed according to his will. And let's say Bob had a will leaving everything he owned to his estranged son from a previous marriage who absolutely hates you. Suddenly, you don't own the cottage with your friend Bob anymore. You own the cottage with Bob's angry son. He can try to force a sale of the property. He can try to move in. It can become an absolute mess.
That is genuinely terrifying. So, step one, check your title deeds.
Absolutely. And just as a quick note for our listeners in Quebec, the text points out that the civil code is different there. They don't use the term real estate. They use immovables. They don't have mortgages. They have hypothecs. The concepts are similar. You pledge the asset to get the loan, but the legal mechanics and the terminology are distinct.
Good to know. Let's talk about the mortgage itself. We have the classic open versus closed debate.
Right. It's a trade-off between flexibility and cost. An open mortgage lets you pay off the whole thing whenever you want, no penalty. You can sell the house, you can refinance, whatever you want to do, but you pay for that privilege. The interest rate might be 7% when a comparable closed mortgage is at 5%.
And a closed mortgage is the opposite.
It locks you in. You get that much lower interest rate. But if you want to break the contract, say you get transferred for work and have to sell the house 2 years into a 5-year term, you face massive penalties. The interest rate differential penalty can easily be tens of thousands of dollars.
But even with a closed mortgage, you're not totally handcuffed. Most of them have prepayment privileges.
This is the secret weapon to killing your mortgage years early. Most closed mortgages allow you to prepay, say, 10% or 15% of the original principal amount every single year without penalty, or they let you double up your payments.
How much of a difference can that actually make?
It's huge because of compounding. The text mentions the Interest Act, which actually guarantees individuals the right to prepay a mortgage after 5 years with a penalty cap of just 3 months' interest. But let's look at the math of those privileges. If you put a one-time $10,000 lump sum on your mortgage early in the term, you aren't just saving the interest on that $10,000 for 1 year. You are saving the interest on that $10,000 for the entire remaining 20 years of the amortization. That one single payment can shave months, even years, off the end of your loan.
But you have to qualify for the mortgage first. And that brings us to the stress test. Everyone complains about this. I can afford the payment at today's rate. Why won't the bank lend me the money?
The stress test was a complete game changer when it was introduced.
Yeah.
And here's the logic behind it. You might be able to afford the mortgage payment at today's interest rate of 5%, but mortgages last for 25 years. Rates change. The stress test forces you to prove that you can afford the payment at a higher qualifying rate, which is usually your contract rate plus 2%. Or a benchmark rate set by the Bank of Canada, whichever is higher.
So even if I'm getting a mortgage at 5%, the bank is testing my finances as if the rate was 7%.
Exactly. It's a safety buffer. It protects you, the borrower, from future rate hikes so you don't lose your house if and when rates go up, and it protects the entire banking system from a wave of mass defaults.
Yeah.
It's incredibly annoying when you're trying to buy your first home, but it keeps the whole system stable.
Now, here's a strategy in the text that blew my mind a little bit. It sounds like some kind of cheat code. The RRSP mortgage.
This is a very niche, very advanced strategy. It's called a non-arm's length mortgage. And essentially, you are lending your own RRSP money to yourself to buy your house. Instead of paying interest every month to a good bank, you write the check to your own RRSP.
That sounds amazing. I'm paying myself back. Why isn't every single person in Canada doing this?
Because the barriers to entry are really high and the math often doesn't work out as well as it sounds.
Okay, what are the cons?
First, you need enough cash in your RRSP to actually fund the mortgage. If you need a $500,000 mortgage, you need to have $500,000 in your RRSP. Most young home buyers don't have anywhere near that. Second, the mortgage has to be insured, like with CMHC insurance, even if you have 20% down. That insurance costs money. Third, there are significant legal and administration fees to set it all up.
Okay.
And fourth, and this is the big one, it's a disaster for asset allocation. If you do this, your entire retirement portfolio is now invested in one single illiquid asset, your house. You have zero diversification. If the housing market in your city crashes, your home value drops, and your retirement fund takes a massive hit because the collateral backing its main asset is worth less.
Right. You've tied everything together in one single basket. It's incredibly risky.
It can work for some people, maybe very conservative investors who just want a guaranteed fixed income return inside their RRSP, but for most people, it's administratively heavy and far too risky.
Finally, what happens if it all goes wrong? You default on the mortgage. The text distinguishes between power of sale and foreclosure. I have to admit, I always thought those were synonyms.
They are not, and it's a critical legal distinction. They are very different remedies for the lender. Power of sale is the most common process in provinces like Ontario. It's relatively quick. The lender forces the sale of the property on the open market. They take what they are owed, the remaining principal, the interest, all their legal fees. If the house sells for more than the total debt, the extra money goes back to you, the borrower.
So you keep your equity.
You keep your remaining equity. The lender doesn't want the house. They just want their cash back. They even have a fiduciary duty to try and sell it at a fair price.
And foreclosure, how is that different?
Foreclosure is a different beast. It's court-driven and much slower, and it's common in provinces like BC and Alberta. In a foreclosure, the lender goes to court to actually take title, to take legal ownership of the property.
They become the owner.
They become the owner. And here's the kicker. If the lender completes a foreclosure and takes ownership of your house, and then 2 months later the property value in the neighborhood skyrockets and they sell it for a huge profit, the lender keeps all of that profit. The original borrower gets nothing.
Wow. That is a crucial difference. In a power of sale, you keep your equity. In a foreclosure, you can lose it all.
Correct. So if you are ever in the unfortunate position of being in default, you need to know which process your lender is using in your province.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from the psychology of Solomon Goldsmith to the sneaky math of car leases and the legalese of foreclosure.
It's a lot, but it really is the blueprint. We started by saying financial planning is like structural engineering. We've looked at the foundation, which is your net worth. We've looked at the plumbing, which is your cash flow. We've examined the load-bearing walls of debt and the roof of real estate.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? What's the big takeaway?
It means you need to treat your finances as a system. All these pieces are connected. You can't fix your net worth if your cash flow is bleeding out every month into a bad car lease. You can't build real wealth if you're carrying a lot of bad debt that isn't tax efficient. And you can't sleep at night if you don't have that basic liquidity ratio sorted out. Remember the insurance premium of having cash on hand.
Before we go, I want to leave everyone listening with a provocative thought that the text brings up. We talked about the power of prepaying mortgages, but the text also mentions the opportunity cost of doing that. And this feels like the ultimate battle between the math brain and the sleep brain.
It is the ultimate dilemma in personal finance. Here is the scenario. You have a spare $50,000. Do you put it against your mortgage, or do you invest in the stock market?
Okay, so the math brain says, look at the rates. If my mortgage interest rate is 3% and I can reasonably expect the stock market to return 7% on average over the long term, I'm an absolute idiot if I pay off the mortgage. I'm giving up that 4% spread. I should leverage that cheap debt.
Mathematically, the math brain is 100% correct. Paying off a 3% debt is a guaranteed but very low 3% return. But then there's the sleep brain. Being completely debt-free offers a profound psychological security that a spreadsheet cannot possibly capture. If you lose your job, a paid-off house is a fortress. No one can kick you out. A portfolio of stocks is volatile. It could be down 20% exactly when you need to sell some of it to buy food. I have never, ever met a client who paid off their mortgage and said, I really regret this. I wish I still had more debt.
So the real question is, are you willing to destroy wealth on paper, mathematically, in order to buy peace of mind?
And there is no right answer to that question. It is deeply personal. That is why step 2 of the whole process, the qualitative data, the knowing yourself, being honest about what lets you sleep at night, is the most important step of all. If you are Solomon Goldsmith, you pay off the house. If you are a young, aggressive inventor with high job security, maybe you invest the cash.
That is the perfect place to wrap up. We challenge you, our listener, to take your own financial selfie. Do you actually know your net worth? Do you know your ratios? Do you know the money factor on your car lease?
The first step to getting to that consolidation phase is knowing exactly where you stand in the accumulation phase. It's time to turn on the lights.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Goodbye.